live on YouTube and we'll go live on Zoom as well. So hi Lisa, Lisa Starr. It's a great privilege for me, truly, not just exaggerating with that word, to see you again and meet with you for this special occasion that we've been talking about for quite a while, and I've been envisioning it for quite a long time in my journey. The possibility to connect with international teachers and share our perspectives from different sides of the world and different forms of experience. And today we'll be talking about the magnetic moon of the 13 moon calendar, the first month or moon out of the 13 moons of the year. And I'm really excited to dive into it with you. But before we begin, I'd love for you to, if you could introduce yourself for our audience, for new viewers, people that have never met you before, and share a bit about yourself, what you do, how's it been going for 25 years with the Mayan wisdom in your life?
That's true. Well, hello. I am happy to be here and grateful that you would set it up, being more of the tech savvy of our pairing. I live in California. I have always lived in California, essentially. And so out here in the West Coast with some radical fringe ideas, I was introduced to Jose Arguelles's Dream Spell, which is sort of this bridge between ancient Mayan and some of the modern anglicized English vernacular around the calendars, by my mother when I was a teenager. And my mother was one of his direct students, and I did not take to it at all because I was a teenager, but I circled back when I was about 30 years old, and my young daughter, she was only 5, was really interested in what her grandmother was showing her. And I wanted to honor that our family didn't really have a spiritual path or religion, that we had to choose one, and I let her choose. And then, as with many things with children, their interest falls away immediately and they're on to the next thing. But I ended up staying completely enthralled with the calendar. I mean, literally every day since that time, which was 25 years ago. And it's been one of the ways I have felt, super spiritually inspired and dedicated and disciplined, but also just amazed because nothing other than being a parent and, they're out of the home now has had the tenacity as following these calendars. So in my life, it is pretty much the center point of consistency and a form of devotion.
Amazing. And you've been teaching for how long? How many years have you been passing on this wisdom that you learned on your own?
I mean, it's the first couple of years seemed like enough to then teach. So I've been teaching essentially the bulk of the time I've been following. And it started with much more direct teaching because it was before the internet culture arrived. And that was really special in communities where I lived. And then it has turned to radio, then podcasting for the last 20 years because it's important to find people far out in the recesses of our planet in order to create this kind of consortium of interest and the community where we sort of feel the supportive energy that we're not doing it alone.
Beautiful. And how was it, a large community at the time or relatively large? How many people were circulating this knowledge during those years?
I am a loner. So I've never been in my mother isn't. See, I would just describe like the personality frequency in my family meant that she kind of had the entourage of all those original seekers who had studied with Jose. And they were strongly based in Oregon, also West Coast, but not near where I was. So I think, I have no idea how many people gathered for those like rainbow gathering kinds of experiences around each new year, but I was just with a handful, less than 10 sort of cycling interested people when I began. But I really consider it something you can completely experience richness with when you're just alone with the time itself.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And So you've been following the calendar since the mid 2000s, if we can refer to time in that way, somewhat 25 years ago. So that was year
It
2000
was
pretty much.
it was like when we were counting out the Gregorian calendar was such a passion as the, 1999. It was in the first, Gregorian month of 2000. So
Incredible.
new millennia, new calendar for me.
Yeah, it's very symbolic for me that this wisdom to us, where I'm sitting, came from the West. Whereas where we look at our ancient traditions, and I always look eastward, like the ancientity, if I can say that, of the world kind of comes from the east. All the Indian area and China and this area, the Middle East, has this very ancient kind of pulse to it. And at some point when I was exposed to this wisdom, it kind of occurred to me, I don't know where I picked it up, but I remember this clear notion that the new information that's going to help us prevail through these times and progress, it's going to come from the West. And
Yeah.
we're somewhat here in the Middle East, kind of almost in the center of that perspective of East and West. You can always spin the globe and look at it from a different perspective, but this is the common perspective we were handed down. So you were really seeing this millennial peak and kind of new times, and you got the calendar at the same time showing up in your life. And before we dive into the magnetic moon, I'm really curious how it was for you, the time leading up to the 21st of December 2012 in your area, or the people you were meeting. How was it speaking about this wisdom before this date? Because for me and the people that met me, I've been teaching it after. So
Right.
it's kind of a
Well,
different perspective.
I have I have a few things. I wanted to kind of add to what you just said about the West, that I think it's really beautiful and poignant that the Americas get their ancient masters when we follow the Mayan teachings and trace it back to the origins in some way. We're finally acknowledging that we had this incredibly astute, profound, intellectually rich, I guess spiritually sort of blessed or pure channel coming from like the pyramids of our own here in the Americas. And I don't have any genetic attachment to that, but my daughters do. They are Native American and Latina coming out of Mexico. So I think it's kind of a weird buried secret that we don't acknowledge Central America for being such masters, and so that's part of my cause, is kind of the resurrection or defiance, to be like, no, it was just pretty much this epic place of brilliance and attunement. It's interesting because I'm like 25 years in, and so 2012 was the halfway mark for me, 12 in, 12 out. And it was different then because before the internet, we had like new age bookstores, and like the new age was sort of its own subheading of the culture. And that seemed to dissipate when we went into a digital world. I was never good at being new age, but that's where I would find a lot of the people interested in the calendar. And I could teach again more communally or introduce my own writings in settings where people would gather who had no knowledge of the Mayan teachings or the dream spell, but they would have all these other connected beliefs to something that we kind of call New Age. I'm glad that that is not prevalent anymore. I had so much interest from that community in 2011 and
You
2012.
must have been a bit of a celebrity, like
It
you like
was
know what's going to
like that.
happen.
It was very much like getting, the call, like it's your time to shine. And then I think it's good because I have like I have a smaller ego about this stuff than I think some, just because there's a certain purity where I don't get too much attachment to being known for it. And it was good because the minute the date happened and there wasn't decision that nothing had come of it, it was just dropped so quickly that it's been the reverse. It's sort of less interest than ever in terms of a in community or in relationships. The internet gave everyone their access to their specific interest and kind of disbanded some of the
Mm.
larger. So, on
That's
the other
interesting.
hand, it's been really wonderful I mean, I had no attachment to it being the end of the world. That didn't sound real to me. I knew it was the end of a calendar. I was following the calendar of the Maya that wasn't ending, so I didn't have the sense that I would experience the crisis end of the world. And so it's been kind of interesting to see that that's generated its own headlines independent of any Mayan prophecy, like the world is ending. So it seems like the prophecy was more attuned than we recognized at the outset.
Yeah, yeah. I always say it was a bit of a Hollywoodized story that they made a movie out of in 2009. Kind of they caught the wave of, oh, there might be the story coming, so let's make a movie out of it. And people really, like people do, really got to believing and hoping that things there will be a big real one moment flash of a change on the world, and things like this kind of illusion that things can just break through, some dream can break through this physical reality and change things immediately in one go for everyone at once.
Yeah.
I also had, from an early stage, I had a really clear understanding this is not the story, and it's cute that people believe that the world can change like this, but it's not the story. The indigenous would never tell such a story because it's just not based on anything that was before as we know it. Maybe there were some times, some spaceships or some earthquakes or some meteors, but not like
Yeah.
we.
Some
Not,
colonists.
yeah, that was a big meteor. Yeah. So, so the 13 moon calendar came along with the dream spell calendar pretty much as an alternative to the Gregorian calendar and a kind of harmonic new way to look at the evolution of time and us as a part of it. And it gave this kind of I know Jose was at some point touring the world along with some of his followers to really meet politicians and try to actually change the mainstream calendar, which is a very beautiful monkey kind of
Yeah.
illusion dream that he went after. I think it's really gorgeous. Something that for us from here in this part of the world, it's really like something that could happen in America. That there can wake up this man, kind of this prophecy, and really be courageous and charismatic enough to enroll people into this possibility. And if I'm not mistaken, some countries were really at some point considering taking it more seriously, and there was a bit of a movement going on around there, which I think and believe that if a day comes that some kind of a shift like this would actually happen on a official level, it could be incredible. I don't see it happening in the upcoming future, but who knows? So, since when have you been following the 13 moon calendar? Since when has it been accompanying you in your life?
Really, from the beginning, I started following sort of the whole collection of calendars that I call natural time. Dreamspell is what Jose Arguelles started with when he created almost like a board game to teach people Mayan cycles. But I jumped in when it was a calendar that you could just buy and you would have an alternative brand new idea about time where it started on July 26th instead of January 1st. So I jumped in the middle of a year in the resonant moon, the seventh, right in the middle of the year. And so it took, a few moons of that year before I was starting a new Mayan year. And so it's been the whole time except for that window. And yeah, I mean, I wanted to say that while again, I hate to bring any listener into like the mom-daughter like psychology in my family, but I very much come out of like, we're going to change, Jose Arguelles's view that we can change governments and get them to do this. I was way more cynical, just a generation different. Like, that's not going to happen. And so it's almost this nascent, like continued rebellion. Like that's not my goal or belief that you can affect such big bureaucratic change. But at the same time, it's very easy for me to understand how arrhythmic and imbalanced our artificial or unnatural Gregorian calendar is, meaning that the month lengths are different and really strangely different in a way that children don't understand. And it took into my adulthood to even memorize, our month lengths because it's so unreasonable. And then there would be this sense like, what? You can take 365 days, and instead of having weird lengths of months, you can have perfectly harmonious 28-day months, and you get a whole extra month because that's the math. 13 times 28 days in a month is 364 days. So that immediately um, is impressive. And I do think it's hilarious, just hilarious that we as a global culture cannot let go of something so antiquated and sort of barbaric when we modernize everything else that we do. So, we don't have a streamlined calendar. I don't require that it would be like Mayan and that it would start in July 26th, but just it's very, very funny, our attachment to something so um, clunky, clumsy, and rooted in a lot of like historic bad leadership, like the Romans got involved, and then the papacy, the Pope had a big part in it. In fact, we call it the Gregorian calendar for Pope Gregory. So like, how do we get stuck in something so outdated, and yet here we are?
Yeah,
So I like to teach from that place or talk from that place of like, this is just a way to get in balance and harmony with rhythm, which is really good for the human body and soul.
beautiful. I take that. I take that from you. Thank you. It's very. I really identify what you were just saying, and I totally embody it as well as a rhythmic teaching to bring more harmony and order that's based on a natural rhythm, not an unnatural, artificial, man-made, especially male-made calendar. Um, and so when you follow these cycles now for almost 25 years, what's the influence you find it on your life that you've really almost half your life have been consciously practicing these cycles and observing these cycles and sharing your insight and understandings of these cycles? How's it been affecting you?
I don't really think it's made my life like better per se, as if it were something you could achieve bliss, like a utopic bliss. I'm vibrating at this higher vibration, and I don't think that it has even made me like more psychologically, fit, meaning the way it's touched my life is just as a very reliable frame that I totally believe in the benefit of the frame. And the frame is that life will cycle in ups and downs, which we know, like colloquially, we know life goes up and down, but this is a description of a cycle of 13 stages of life, and it's wave shaped. So it like takes a long time for it to get to its peak, and then it quickly collapses. And so I'm orienting myself to the learning process of growth that has all these stages and moments where it's more accelerated and dynamic, and then that you can ascend, that you can chase ascension or ride to like a higher place, which conceivably is closer to divinity. And then you have to fall back to earth as long as you're incarnated, you know. And that was maybe some of my judgment or resistance when I was younger, that people were chasing perfect abundance or perfect spiritual awakening. And I like understanding the teaching of existence to include falling back to earth, and that you can taste enlightenment, but there's still plenty of shadows cast on this planet and people caught in darkness that is either ignorance, which I'm not going to judge what that is, or they're suffering. They're suffering. They don't feel the light. And I want to make sure I'm not beyond that. I want to pay attention to the darkness on earth because I think being incarnated means that you exist in that shadow and light. So that's what I've gotten is it's an ego death. It's a constant ego death. I'm super egotistical in all kinds of personality quirks, but when I talk about the calendar and when I pay attention to it alone, I take a lot of hits for humanity. Like this is rough. It is rough to kind of be alive. So I like the humility. I think that's what I wish we had more of culturally.
That's really beautiful. So, so from what I understand, you're saying that it hasn't necessarily made your life more enlightened in the kind of Western New Age kind of perspective of, yeah, I'm following this wisdom and now I'm becoming a more clever person and a more understanding person of how things really work, so I can not fall into these little human pitfalls that every human has to go through in their lives, but more that it's given you this kind of foundation to observe your life through, and not just your personal life, but also the collective, universal life, and kind of embody this understanding that there will come higher times and lower times. And I can reflect or assume that over the years it's kind of given you a form of wisdom through which you can also observe other people and guide other people to see themselves through, and probably bring some more compassion and acceptance through humility and kind of humbleness. That it's really beautiful. Is this you? Does it feel right how I reflected it to you?
Yeah. I felt like, oh, there's my doom and gloom. I feel like I really carry the legacy of the shadow because my birth astrology is to be a blue storm, and storm is confrontational and is kind of the moment right before the sun returns. Storm is trying to get us back to sunlight, but my presence is not rich with like light and ease. So I want to qualify what I said by adding, we're talking about the cycle of 13, which is carried over a year and is ancient in essentially all the cultures, indigenous cultures on the planet, following the lunations, following the moon, following the female menstrual moon, and getting to 13 moons in a year. So we're focusing on that here, but following natural time, or Mayan, I call it Mayan astrology, includes all these totemic representations of day signs, such as I'm, a blue storm, and the days progress with these other icons that are so magical that I follow the calendar because it's full of magic. And I'm still stuck in childhood discovery of fairy tales that touched me so deeply as a non-religious child in the hippie movement. I was like, what? These Greek and Roman gods? Like, this is amazing. And when I got to natural time and these teachings, the dream spell, I was like, what are you talking about? This is real. Each time I pass through something described in this lens of the original ancient Maya passed down to us, it the synchronicities in the day or in the moon show me that it's real, but it's magic. And so that's really why I'm in it. It's magic. And magic is a salvation to suffering for me because it reminds me that there's a divine presence that you can feel. You're not alone in the suffering. So I kind of want to qualify my um yes. But the magic doesn't take suffering away. I think that's what I mean about the wave form
Mm.
is like, there's no magic like, the good witch, and now you have red shoes and everything is fine. I mean, even Dorothy's journey in Oz was so full of challenge. And I think that really is the path in life, is to face challenge over and over, but also find the blessings. You don't have to find them. They're delivered to you and you feel them and you recognize them. And when we're in the wave cycles, I think it teaches us to be in that rhythm of loss and ascent and descent and new sense of hope. And then you just have to be comfortable. And the last thing I'll say is, like, I am not like a super earth person, but I believe as a female, you live through menstrual cycles for your whole adult life. And I think that men are equally affected and have their own undiagnosed or unrepresented cycles. But it's so helpful to diminish like I can do anything and come back to our bodies and the limitations and that they are naturally rhythmic as well. And so I think following the calendar and its rhythms is very physicalizing instead of like, what? And that's helpful for me, who tends to be out there anyhow.
It's
And
beautiful.
you should speak about it because here I have a man and I can quiz you about whether you can speak about how you have cycles too that are either biological or based on your response to the moon cycles or anything you've thought of.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I've been investigating into that and observing ever since I've kind of spiritually awakened, probably now 14 years ago. Since the first time I realized that when there's a full moon, it actually affects me. Like real time, I can feel a difference in my body. And ever since, especially working with the cycles of natural time, I've been asking myself, so where does this show up in my life? So obviously around the full moon, not so obvious probably for many people, definitely men, but for me it became quite obvious early on. Around the full moon, I could really feel my insides stirring up. I can really feel I've recognized this frequency already. It's very present, and for the past 7 years, I've been living in houses that are kind of in the forest, so I barely get to see the moon. Whereas before, for 5 years, I was living with the moon every single day. I would see the moon, and sometimes I don't notice the moon phase, and then I start to go through these feelings inside of my body, and I notice, and then I remember it's like it's full moon, isn't it? And then it is always. But something interesting that happened to me recently in a workshop I gave in a festival here in Israel. I was talking about I was teaching about the natural time, and I was speaking about the cycles and how men are have cycles but aren't necessarily aware of it because we were never taught and it's unspoken of. And one guy said that he's heard this theory that the men's cycle is connected with the sun. It's a daily cycle. And then it kind of dropped. I was like, I can really relate to that. I've really been recognizing in the last years of my life how I have a real cycle through every day
Mm.
with the sun. And it clicked. It made a lot of sense. And I really enjoyed getting that perspective. It gave me really clarity according to myself. And ever since I've been practicing letting myself more and more ease into this natural daily cycle, and I can really start to notice my times, when I shouldn't be active at all, when I should be active, when I'm the best, when I'm the most at ease, going outward to the world and being with people, and when I need my time inside. It's really interesting. Um, but definitely the idea of natural cycles has awakened in me thanks to the living daily according to the dream spell calendar and following the wave spells and realizing that there is this wave spell pattern and living through the synchronicities, which, like you say, are magic. I'm still investigating to really understand how is this calendar made up in some way, whether he channeled it or he received it as an offering in another dimension, spiritual dimension, and brought it through his humanly body and started teaching it here on the face of the earth. But how is it that this calendar is so synchronized, or at least from my perspective and many people around me that neither live their life and observe life through the lens of the mind perspective, or meet it for the first time without any idea and say, wow, like I can feel these waves.
Yeah.
And I'm still really at awe. How does this world work in the way that came this man, which was a blue monkey, and I really treat him as such. He was a gangster. He was a child embodied in an adult, and he was playing his game and really influencing the world, which is beautiful. Which always led me really to be curious on how is it over the years for you, because the dream spell calendar, I think we can agree that the magic, we can experience it every day, and there's
Yeah.
so many signs and synchronicities that show us that this is happening. There's a spark of truth in this calendar that you can't argue with. And I've been wondering, how is it for people that are living with a 13 moon calendar for a long time, if you've been realizing the cycles and the synchronicities also through the moons. So now we're in the magnetic moon, and how are you feeling the magnetic moon in your life in these days?
Well, when you go through year after year, right, you start to recognize each of, Jose Gualis called them tones. So the 13 tones, he called them the 13 tones of creation. I always have to just like drop off anything that feels too like grandiose, but the 13 tones, we can find them in 13-day cycles. It's always a wave spell of 13 tones. 13 days is something we can follow, 13 moons. We'll talk about that here, and 13 years. Those are the three layers of 13 that we follow in the calendars of natural time. So you get to be kind of like friends with them in their own way. They have kind of like, here you are again. But the first moon or tone, the magnetic one, I think is sort of like it is the beginning. And we can recognize beginning universally. We don't have to throw out what January 1st feels like. People have a sense of renewal coming out of winter solstice and beginning the new year that isn't totally different or alien to starting a new natural time year. It just happens to be kind of the opposite season. So when things are new, what I notice is not like I am making a decision to begin again, which is sort of how we treat the Gregorian New Year, is like this year I intend to do this. You have intentions and aspirations that you decide with your mind based on your lived experience. And so, I honor that. People wish for change. They wish for a redemption. Let me do this differently. But how I distinguish the difference and the singular importance of the first moon or the first month of this natural time year is that we just see what comes to us. Magnetic, he chose that word because we attract our karma, essentially. We attract our purpose for the year. We don't decide it. We don't use our ego. That's why I follow this calendar, because I kind of think that's more magical. Like, the year is beginning. What am I supposed to do? It's not a total blank canvas, in part because we're in a 13-year cycle, which has its own continuum, in part because this calendar isn't erasure of everyday life. It is a frame and a support and an inspiration for everyday life. So it's not going to be all new things, but there'll be some elemental new purpose or new fate that we're shown through what happens in the beginning of this year. We're currently like well into the magnetic moon. The magnetic moon to me has this flavor of a frenetic pace. Like, oh my God, things are really pinging. There is a lot going on. And that's partly because it follows the end of our year. The end of the year is a calming down after a big wave of growth and activity, a whole year-long arc of change, and things smooth out almost to stillness. And then there's sort of this like, bam, new year. And I think that around me, I'm not surrounded by people. Even my partner doesn't really follow this calendar. He'll listen to me, but I'm surrounded in my living situation in humanity by people that don't. But you can still see the kind of mood or temperament of the moon affecting people. And that's part of the magic, right?
Yeah,
So
is
in the
that.
magnetic moon attracting our purpose, last thing I'll say is I'm just really into the questions that Jose Arguelles chose or channeled, which the questions are so basic. And so you can ask yourself the whole 28 days of our first moon, what is my purpose? And every day you get an answer.
Mm,
And you also kind of get the answer of what isn't my purpose, because some things seem to fall away in
mm,
in the new year.
mm. It's really beautiful. It's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I can share from my experience that I'm a very thorough learner, and for me it's now my 13th year of dream spell synchronicity, daily synchronicity for myself. Fifth year of teaching the dream spell calendar to others. And the 13 moon calendar has always been something I've been kind of waiting for it to call me. Because from the white mirror perspective that I am, I really do see life as an endless journey, and I see time as really just an illusion. Honestly, it's a game we play as humans to organize ourselves together. It's not some higher given form of evolution. It's really just the human mind trying to make order of everyday life so we can keep some kind of a rhythm and feeling of we know what's going on. So for me, the 13 moon calendar has always been this kind of like the next level.
Mm.
It's like when I'm called to grow with this, if I never even took it for granted that I will be called to grow with this, because I never know till today why I've been given this wisdom to pass it on. Besides what I do know, that my purpose is to help people to prevail through the hardships of these times and to really evolve into a higher potential that's existing with this in all of us, and also to be of service to the world, to help the different systems to evolve when my time will come to be more a systematic person. It's not yet really my calling yet. So for me, this is really quite a beginning with the 13 moon calendar,
Mm.
which is also why I was very curious to meet up with you, knowing that you have this experience and we both share our overtone perspectives. And I love listening to your podcast over the years. So from what I take from what you just shared, I understand that the 13 moon perspective, it's really like taking the wave spell movement and broadening it to a whole entire month, 28-day month.
Yeah.
And I really love the idea of using the questions that Jose Aquiles left us to kind of observe ourselves and our life through the lens of these questions over through each month. And I would never imagine asking myself the same question every day because I'm so kind of here and now orientated towards this moment, and it's a very white mirror thing for me as well. Like what's going on in this moment, it's a brand new moment. But I really think that if I would be asking myself every day, what is my purpose, and even writing it down, one sentence, I'd learn so much about who I really am and what I'm really here to do. Because every time we ask the question, we're in a different mindset, a different mood, a different energetic state. If I ask it first thing I wake up in the morning, I'll be like, oh, I'm just meant to, I don't know, push myself out of bed. That's what I'm meant to do every day. That's really what I need to do every day. That's what I'm meant to do. But if I ask it at 4 or 5 p.m., I'd be all enthusiastic about what I'm doing and be like, wow, my purpose is to do something big in the world, something that's big for me. So it must have an impact on the world as well. So for all our listeners, I could really, I really kind of give you this gift of taking what you just said and practicing it, asking ourselves, especially we can do it any day, all the time, forever, but especially if we choose to synchronize ourselves with the 13 moon calendar to work with this question: what is my purpose? What is
Yeah.
what do I attract naturally into my life when I just am?
Yep. I um I I feel like, just to be clear, because it's 25 years is a long time in terms of like deepening or having new knowledge kind of added to the canon that was left by Jose Arguelles, who's deceased, right? And so one of the things I became really fixated on along the way was looking at the Mayan numeric system, which is based on dots and bars, but you could say like sticks and stones, that they were counting. They didn't have paper commerce, so they were counting with these elements like cacao pods or stones. And then, one is one dot, and then two is two dots, three is three dots, four is four dots, and then five is a stick or a bar, a stream. So I think a lot about like that sacred geometry, that when you start the cycle of 13 with the first magnetic tone, the way I see it is like it's before the Big Bang. Everything is compressed that you're going to experience or need to know to grow in the cycle of 13 is right there in the first stage, first tone. And then when it's the second tone and it's two dots, it's like splitting a cell or whatever they say. And you have what was one is now two, but it's not adding another one, it's splitting it. And three, actually, to me, is the dropping in of like divinity where you're in a triangle. So it's you've split sort of self and other, and here comes the higher power or the Godhead that you understand and believe in. And then you keep progressing from there. But just to stay in the magnetic, it's like that's why there's intensity, because it's not just what is my purpose for this moment in this moon, but what is my purpose for this whole year? And we'll forget because we'll be in later stages. But that's why it's interesting to journal or take notes in the magnetic moon, because you will see that, like, again, your fate or karma is sort of being delivered right now. And you'll be tracking the things that are arriving in your life as strong and vital, if also overwhelming and scary or irritating. You'll be tracking them the whole year. And the same thing I want to say is like, because a lot of us come to studying the 13 moon, like through these sessions, the 13 moon calendar, we're already studying 13-day wave spells. I think of the moon as 28 days to really learn what a tone is. And then you can apply it back to your 13-day cycle experiences and study. So, like I said, it's kind of like a very long visit from a particular energy field where you really get to know it and feel intimate with it. And that allows you to be so much more dexterous and expert in a way when you're doing your 13-day cycles. So those layers, and not to mention the 13-year cycles, which again, you evolve. In the beginning, I just followed one day. I didn't even know the 13 days. It was just, what is this day? And then you learn the wave spell is really important, the 13 days. And then, oh, this 13 moon calendar, that's wild. And then now, I mean, I really care about the 13-year cycles also.
Beautiful. Just listening to you, it's I can feel it stirring inside of me. This kind of curiosity and excitement on the journey of starting to deeper look into the moons. It's kind of from a very humble place. I haven't got into it because of a humble place, because it was very important for me not to look for knowledge, spiritual knowledge, from a mental idea of, oh, I need to know this because I already know this and I know this and now I need to know the next level, but more to really await for it to be something calling me from my heart, from my insides, to journey it through. And I could really feel your experience through how you're talking about it. And when I look at it as well, actually for me, from the very beginning, I was following the years. I was really realizing and recognizing the year. I started in the White Rhythmic Wizard year, so 2011 going into 2012. And then came the Resonant Storm year, which I was already very awake into. And ever since, the year perspective has always been something very vivid for me. I could really see it in the collective and reflect it very clearly. And also my personal year cycle is something that's guiding me also from the very beginning. And it was like really a big wow realization, like, wow, this is happening. I remember the moment I realized that I looked back at previous years, and what was my sign during that year, my personal sign, and what was the collective year. And I can really see the processes in a very clear way reflected through the perspective of the years. So when I'm listening to you, I understand I'm not brand new to the 13 moon calendar. I've been following it, just not on the more kind of zoom in to each moon and moon. And I feel very excited to dive into this perspective, because I absolutely recognize the magneticism of the magnetic moon. I can really relate to how you described it. It's like, what's my karma? What do I attract without trying to do anything? What are the patterns that keep showing up when I'm even when some new beginning has started? what patterns are still continuing with me over the years, over my life. And definitely I recognize these patterns in this month. I can really see it so clearly how these patterns are showing up. And I also find that every magnetic moon, it's very connected to the 13-year cycle
Yes.
because of the first magnetic year.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like this reminder, like where we are right now in the more larger perspective of 13-year cycle.
That's right.
So
Yeah,
it's all
I do. I want to amplify that without confusing beginners. It's just like I think at the beginning of the year, such as we describe it as beginning July 26th, you do notice that you're in a totally different energy frequency as we move from each of the tribes that represents our 4-year cycle. So it's like, oh, this is all new in that realm, and that can take up space. And then you have to remind yourself later in the year sometimes, what year are we in? Oh, that checks out. But right now it's very much on my mind. And I wanted to say one sort of last thing that I think helps beginners feel into this is that we in school, at least in the US, this is a school calendar, like we grow up starting our school year essentially right in line with the natural time year. So you can reflect much more easily back in your life to your childhood based on a calendar that starts in the midsummer, mid to late summer, and ends a year after, then like what was I as a child doing in 1974? Like it's just very seamless. You go third grade, what was I doing? And you can learn what kind of year it was, but you can also remember like how it feels to go. It's like time to go back to school soon. A child is kind of jumping by midsummer for less for more form, for function and purpose, and getting ready to return to that environment. And that I still feel that is part of what shapes my understanding of our new year. Is like you had the nice bliss of summer and being in the health and vitality of an easier season in the Northern Hemisphere, being warm and having abundance of food, and then you kind of are strengthened to run towards winter when there's scarcity and darkness. Anyway, I just wanted to help
yeah,
people like this is really natural. It's called natural time, but it is really natural for a lot of us already in our socialized clock of how a year happens.
yeah, yeah. And it's actually also the Jewish New Year begins every year around this time as well.
What?
A bit later, yeah. It usually comes around September, October,
Yeah,
beginning of October. So this is the Jewish New Year regularly. It's in line.
amazing.
It's aligned with the school year in the Northern
Amazing.
Hemisphere. So here, I think it's a bit easier for people to feel this energy shift. I know from the gatherings that I've been organizing into the day out of time and giving the teachings of the year, the new year that's beginning. I've been receiving really clear feedbacks from people that participate that they really can identify with this frequency energy shift of the year and really notice the the reflection of the 13-year sign in their personal lives. And it is indeed natural. And I'm so happy that we have this possibility to share, you and me and the few others chosen ones. I don't know how few, but probably tens or hundreds of people around the world that really have the calling to pass this wisdom during these times. And we're gonna start wrapping up soon, but I wonder if you can give our listeners any kind of I like the word tips in Hebrew, as to if neither they're beginners or already, have been riding the 13 moons for some time in their life. What have you find that's been good for you in the process of beginnings and magnetic moons? Is there anything you think about that people could benefit from knowing from you about this?
Yes. Two things come to mind, and I'll leave it there because I could go on and on. One thing is that the year can start in a place of overstimulation and overwhelm. I think because of what I described, like it has the whole unfurling of a year's activities or energy, like condensed. Also, within that first moon, the one that we're in, it includes our challenge for the year also. So we have the question, what is my purpose? But the second moon or tone, the lunar moon, has the question, what is my challenge? And that's kind of for the whole wave spell of the year. But we're already experiencing our challenge because remember, if you follow my perception, just mine, I'm describing that the second moon is held within the first. So if it's challenging in the beginning of the year, we're going to get clarity on that in the second moon. It doesn't solve the challenge. We spend the whole year essentially grappling with our karma or fate about what is challenging, what challenges us to grow. It's not like, what is my problem? It's where do I need to grow? Where will I be challenged? What is challenging me to grow? But just hold on. If it's like, this is too much, or I don't know what's going on, you will soon. You will soon. You will in the second moon. And that's the one thing. And then the other is just more about practicing, beginning something in not knowing instead of beginning. And usually we're so conditioned to declare what a new year is. And so I think it's just so poetic and a huge shift internally to just start newness, having it
Mm,
represent the unknown. And so if you can't grapple with all these terms or the layers of the calendar that we talk about, and you're just like, I just want to follow the Zolkin, it's enough. It is enough. But if you're exploring, like, okay, I want to deepen what I'm aware of on the 13 moon wave spell, then just right now, just be like, I don't know, and take some notes, things that happen in this moon because they represent your purpose and your challenge, and later you'll see it. So treat yourself, the worth of yourself, to documenting some of the experiences that are just happening without trying to analyze them in these first 28 days.
that is beautiful. That's really beautiful, and it all, I know it's great for me to hear. So I'm sure for many others that will listen to this, it will be a great tip or guidance that can really help through this whole year. But yeah, I'm very excited from this beginning since we've set an intention as the powers that be enable us, the natural powers that be, to meet up every moon and share about the current moon according to the 13 moon calendar. So I'm even really excited right now, knowing that we will be meeting up again and reflecting a bit on what we're talking about this month, and then looking at next month from next month's perspective. And I would love my listeners to know that you give a very generous podcast called Natural Time on Spotify, in which we can listen to you speak about daily signs every few days and about the current stage in the 13 moon calendar. And you also connect it with current affairs, especially in the United States, but not only, also on a global scale. And I can keep talking to you for hours. But this is why I'm happy also to kind of hold it together and know that we will be continuing this journey together. And I really want to thank you for accepting my invitation and taking the time and space in your early morning to meet up with me here online and share with people around the world your amazing wisdom that you've gained over the past 25 years and 54 years, because really what you share with us here is your life wisdom. It's not just your wisdom from following the natural time cycles. And I'll also be adding your info in the bio of this, the description of this episode, so people can connect with you on Instagram and find your website and your podcast. And of
Yes.
course, if you guys listening to us have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments below, and either I or Lisa will answer them happily. and follow us. Follow my YouTube channel. Keep up to date when we broadcast our new episodes every moon.
Yes.
And I really want to wish you, Lisa, for this new year that we are beginning together. That you keep sharing your wisdom and any possible chance that comes your way. I really believe that it's a very precious wisdom that you carry within your very loner experience of most of your everyday life. But I'm happy to kind of give you a platform to share it further on and get to new audiences in different parts of the world. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again.
Well, thank you. Thank you for leading me out of my cave because it often requires someone asking me to talk openly for it to happen. But I was just thinking as you were kind of talking about me, to anyone listening, I don't do branding well, but I have a whole bunch of skills that surround my study of the calendar. So, I do readings, I have written books. My website, resonanttruth.com, shows that. I wouldn't want anyone to think that I am only a podcast presence, but that's really the only outreach I do. But I try to do it so that you can have it if it helps. And it's on Spotify and Apple. I think those are the only platforms. But it's also on my website. It lives there as well. So
Beautiful.
thank you. You're heroic to get me to grow. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. Truly my pleasure. So I wish you good days, good calm days, and we will see each other again real soon.
That's why we'll see everyone next moon.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye bye for now.